So I'm going to introduce next is a professor from UCLA and director of the Nano and Pico Characterization Core Facility of the California NanoSystems Institute. Dr. Gimzewski pioneered research on mechanical and electrical contacts with single atoms and moleculars using scanning tunneling microscopic, and was one of the first persons to imagine molecules. Wow. Okay, sorry. I should be just a very neutral moderator, but I can't help it. His current interests are in the nanomechanics of cells and bacteria, where he collaborates with the UCLA Medical and Dental schools. Dr. Gimzewski is also involved in numerous art science collaborative projects that have been exhibited in museums throughout the world. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so it's a pleasure to speak to you all today. And what I'd like to do is I'll tell you something about my life very briefly. Behind me here is a virtual background is actually one of my experiments, which is to 3D print individual atoms. I am involved with the medical school, do lots of research on cancer, and I also actually work on it's a thing called neuromorphic systems, which is a form of like AI type computation where we use hardware rather than software. Anyway, let me start and I'll give you a very, very brief background of my life. This is me when I'm very young. That's my mother. And these people here are various family members. I was born actually, my father was a refugee from Poland from the Second World War. We were extremely poor. We lived in a kind of house that looked like this, tenements. This is the first school I went to, elementary school. And they demolished actually everything that I actually existed in. So this is where I used to live, in the East End of Glasgow, a very bad area. And this demolished area is my high school, okay? So kind of humble beginnings. But I was always inspired by two things. One was art and one was science. And I wanted to actually to be an artist when I was a kid. But they told me at that time, you can't be don't forget art. You have to become an engineer or a scientist. So I really got involved with chemistry. And in those days, I don't think you can buy these anymore. These are chemistry sets. And I would do chemistry at home. I even made some gunpowder, bought the stuff from the pharmacy. I mean, these days you would probably get arrested if you do it. And I made a rocket. Another thing I loved was a thing called mechano. I think you've got a different name for it. And I would build mechanical structures. So I loved chemistry and I loved mechanical structures. And I went to the University of Strathclyde, which is in Scotland. That's 69 to 77. And I learned a lot. I was very inspired. I wasn't very social as a person, really. In 1974, I got my Bachelor of Science. Actually did work on photochemistry, which with this professor. And then my life took another turn. I started to work in ultra high vacuum environments and doing spectroscopy and working in synchrotrons and things like that. And way back then, this is what the computer I had looked like. It was called a PDP-AE. It was very primitive. I used paper tapes. And here I am in the student days. I also became a hippie. Although, you know, today I don't have any hair, but that's me way back. And then I went to Oregon, where I worked in the radiation center with this Professor Dara Thomas and worked on more of that spectroscopy. But I still loved art. Anyway, I went then to the University of Zurich and worked on plasmas and worked on a tokamak in Lausanne. So every so often I would change. I didn't stick to one particular thing. And in 1983, I joined IBM in Zurich, where we were working on a thing called the scanning tunneling microscope. And this guy here is Heini Rohrer. He was a mentor of mine. He got the Nobel Prize in physics for this in 1986. And this is Lord Brouwer's, Carl Quake, who's a very famous scientist from Stanford, and Sir Mark Well, and all these people moved up in the world. And that's Heine and Georg, who got the Nobel Prize. And one thing I learned from them is to try to do the impossible. Don't believe things when people say you can't do that, because this microscope, which can manipulate and look at atoms, and the thing in my virtual background is such a microscope, it enables you to do things that were thought to be impossible and people said would be impossible. And in '86, I was sent to China, where I took that microscope, and it was a monumental moment for me. China was a completely different place in '86. There were hardly any tall buildings at all. There were bicycles and a few government cars, and that was it. And now when I go to China, I can see this explosive, massive development in the country. It's marvelous. Anyway, from this humble background, I became a fellow of the Royal Society, which is one of the most prestigious scientific organizations in the world. So that was monumental for me. So let me end the show, and let me see, I'm going to share something else with you. I'm not watching my time, but I'll do my best. So one of the things I started with Victoria Vesna, who is an artist, media artist, was to set up an art science center at UCLA. One of the things about working in IBM and in general in science is that we need to be creative and to be imaginative. So although this thing is called STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths, I am actually believing in STEAM, which is science, technology, art, okay, and mathematics, if you like. Creativity is one of the most important things. And to get a Nobel Prize, to be successful in life. And there's no time more than now when creativity is important. If you look at the Renaissance period, this is around about the mid 1400s onwards, there was a complete revolution to bring art and science together. And it led to the Industrial Revolution. It was the most important period in the history of humanity. The interesting thing is the Renaissance happened after the plague. The plague was killing off so many people in Europe. I mean, many more than COVID today. And so in this age of COVID, we have to rethink things. And I think we can rethink about changing some fundamental things in technology and in our society. And one of the things we do, and we've been doing for about over 10 years, is to have an art science or a sci-art workshop. And it runs for 2 weeks. It's open to high school kids. They live on the campus, and you can see here, they actually do. They imagine the impossible. And through a series of lectures and actual experiments and creativity, they learn about creativity. They learn their own inner creativity. And one of the important things about it is you get 4 college UC credits that are transferable. And that, it gives you a big advantage in moving forward. So if I was to say, what should you do? I think you should keep an open mind. Maybe you don't exactly know what you want. The needs of society are changing, and you have to find your own niche. Chemists, they don't work with test tubes anymore. It's a completely different world we live in now. Everything is computerized, robotized. It's going to be AI'd. But one of the things you can do is maybe join us at UCLA and spend a couple of weeks talking to artists, scientists, humanities people, get 4 college credits, and then maybe that helps you decide your future. Anyway, it's an incredible journey. And the one piece of advice I would give to you is imagine the impossible.
That'd be great. So we have one question that's really interesting. Can you not be smart enough to be a physicist, chemist? Everyone can study for tests and get their degree, but for those that want to discover new things, do you need to be born with a high IQ? I'm not talking about super high IQ, or at least like a 120.
You know, the IQ test is a very biased test, okay? It has some issues with race and culture and how people get high IQ. I don't believe in the IQ test, sorry. I believe in more your own creativity. If you're really interested in something, okay, you're fascinated by it, you will do well in it. If you're not interested in it and you're trying to learn a test, maybe you can pass the test, but that's not going to make you a scientist. To be a scientist or an artist, you have to have that passion. And that's so important, you know? And I think when David spoke there, we met before, I mean, he expressed that. And you start on a journey, and the journey is not, I want to get here. The journey is the process of learning. So, you know, I'm not really, IQs don't convince me too much. Some of the most brilliant people haven't been able to pass tests. Just look at the history of Einstein, for instance, you know? It's hard for him to get a professorship. He ended up in a patent office.
Okay, one more question from a student. How do we harness our creativity?
How do we harvest?
Harness our creativity. I'm very
I don't think you need, I think you want to harness your creativity. No, I mean, Charles, he's also a good friend of mine. Creativity is boundless. You dive into it like it's a swimming pool. Don't harness it at all. Just live it. These students who are listening, and I hope, you know, it can inspire you, but please, you're welcome also to contact me. It's my second name at Gmail. I'd be happy to respond, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.